My name is Tony Simons, and I have the privilege to work at the World Agroforestry Centre, ICRAF. And firstly, we would like to thank Business for Environment and the other co-hosts for allowing agriculture and rural landscapes such an important platform to discuss sustainability. Now, if we get transport wrong, we can try again. If we get energy wrong, we can try again. If we get our food and water supply wrong, we will die. And that is why we have 4 eminent speakers here today to help us try and understand agriculture and rural landscapes from the perspective of sustainability. And to help frame our discussions, as we sort out the volume levels, to help frame our discussions, sustainable agriculture, what does it actually look like, let's say in 10 years' time? We saw Andrew's wonderful graphs where we had the crystal ball on sustainable agriculture. What would it look like? Secondly, well, firstly, we're going to change mics. Great, thank you. So just to recap, our first issue is, what does sustainable agriculture look like in 10 years' time? Secondly, the win-win-win situations are wonderful. But what do we do where we can't reconcile benefits for the economy, for society, and the environment simultaneously? How do we analyze and assess trade-offs? And lastly, if we can't measure it, it's very hard to manage. What would be those handful of composite metrics that would help us understand sustainability? So here we are in India, a country with 16% of the world's population, with 20% of the world's livestock, but only on 2% of the world's land area, using 4% of the world's water. How can we address the issues of sustainable agricultural landscapes, particularly as well from an Indian perspective? And I'd like to ask each of the panelists to give us a short introduction of their perspectives, and we can start with my immediate right, Sunil from the Royal Bank of Scotland Foundation. Sunil.
Thanks, Tony. Good afternoon to everyone here, and a great opportunity to be here and interacting with all of you. Among the many valid points that have been made since morning, I'll just recollect 2 of them. One was by Hem Pandey from the Ministry of Environment and Forest, when he said, for the communities who live marginally, who live for subsistence, it's not going to be easy to talk to them about participating in climate-friendly or environmentally friendly lifestyles. Number 2, a statement made by Mr. Ramdurai that the next decade should be on action. Both these statements actually form the basis for the work that we do as part of our sustainable development initiatives. And I'm presuming that most of you are familiar with the Royal Bank of Scotland, among the largest banks in the world, very much in the news, all for the wrong reasons, especially back home in London, occasionally in India as well. But there are also many good things that we have done through our sustainability initiatives, and exclusively in the forest landscapes in the country, which means that we have been working with rural populations since 2006. And today I would quickly like to share the outcomes of one of these projects that we have supported. And I have taken the example of one such project in Gujarat, simply because we thought there are numbers with regard to the use of water, which I thought was very, very encouraging. Now, one common problem that we have seen in India is with irrigation command areas, where often there's a big gap between the gross command area of an irrigated area and the actual irrigation that it delivers. A second problem is that of the equitable distribution of water. Typically, we have a situation where farmers close to the head reach squander water, and those who are at the tail end often get no water. So we work in the command areas of 3 medium irrigation projects, Dharoi in Mehsana district, Guhai and Mazum in Sabarkantha, and one branch canal of the Sardar Sarovar Nigam Limited. Now, between these four, they have a total command area of 40,000 hectares. And when we started here 2005, the total irrigation that they were delivering was little more than 12,500. Now, through a series of interventions, I'll put it in two segments. The first segment, Government of Gujarat, NDDB, played a big role in rationalizing the distribution system and creating what we call our Pani Panchayat, which is Water Users Association, where the people themselves manage water on the basis of water available during a season. We stepped in from that stage to push a very strong set of practices for on-farm water management. Now today we can say that what used to be covering just 12,500 hectares initially, our project has been able to achieve a saving of 12.5 million cubic meters of water, which irrigates an additional 20,000 hectares. Now these outcomes have been learnt on the basis of an impact assessment that we have carried out through the IIM Ahmedabad. Now I think there are very strong learnings that are coming out from this particular project of ours. And there was no rocket science, nor was there very heavy investments in infrastructure. It was a set of good practices and knowledge transfer. And if we had to focus on actions like Mr. Ramdura said this morning, we have to find a good medium for transfer of technology and for exchange of knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anil. And our second speaker is Viba Dewan from TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute.
Well, thank you very much, and introducing the topic and making our job easy, that what are the things that we should touch upon. Well, in a way, it's rightly pointed out that food is something that you require every day, 365 days in a year. And right now, if we look at the figures in terms of food and nutritional security, it's not a happy situation even today. And if we look at the figures, what is going to be the scenario? Till 2050, it is that whatever we have consumed till now, humankind has consumed till now, that is what we need to produce, or that will be the consumption level at that stage. So how are we going to cope up when today itself we are asking questions about sustainability? And agriculture is no more a clean occupation either. It's in terms of, because if you look at green revolution, not that I am criticizing that. I always feel that even if we had done audit at that stage, we would have gone ahead with green revolution. But it called for irrigation, high input in terms of use of fertilizers, pesticides, and so on. And somewhere we also failed in the extension, and it is that how do you take the technology to the farmer? It is not that you tell them that you spray more of fertilizer or more of urea. It is more of that you need to use the new gadgets, how much of it is to be supplied and at what stage. So extension system all over the country, more in the developing part, but also in the developed part of the world, it is that we need to take things differently. The challenge is more in countries like us because you are dealing with small and marginal farmers, but it's a challenge everywhere. How do you make agriculture clean? Can we, and rightly pointed out, the farmer who even today is very poor, can we make him, sensitize him towards using cleaner technologies? Or as for others, we give either carbon credits. We also have to involve or get carbon credits for the poor farmer. We have to bring them together. We have to tell them that if you use cleaner technologies, this is in return you will be compensated for. Governments also have a huge challenge, that is in terms of, on one hand, they want food to be affordable, and therefore the minimum support price that is being offered to the farmer, sometimes it doesn't even take care of the expenditure, and that is compensated through subsidies. And subsidies sometimes are wrongly implemented, whether it is in terms of water pricing, it's direct subsidy on fertilizer or whatever. We also have to realize that the game is gradually going from public sector to the private sector, and there again, licensing and other things are going to come in a big way, and governments should be sensitive towards it. We have to take care of how do we ensure that in future also technologies will be available to the small and marginal farmer. I'll also like to touch upon, like some of our countries, we are always comparing ourselves in terms of adopting new technologies with the Western countries which are food secure. And one good example is genetically engineered food. And most of the time it is that if Europe is not accepting, why should we? The problem is we are far too many. Already we are facing challenge. We also have this challenge of that the farmer is not educated, and many a times he's not using even the available technologies such as use of pesticides in the best way. So if we are adopting that technology in life-saving drugs, where is the danger of trying those technologies for the benefit of our own farmers? The challenge is you have to feed many more people. There are many people who are malnourished even today. We keep on tossing organic food. Is it safe? Or it is that use those organic practices, replace as much of fertilizer as much as you can do by using more sustainable, taking agriculture to cleaner way of doing agriculture. And it's not that you have to grow, say, rice in Punjab or the states where the water table is going down, and rather than facing problems such as heavy metals coming along with your water, than to grow other crops which are far more safer. And then, of course, is the last wastelands which are existing over there. And there I would like to touch upon the use of agroforestry. Why can't we grow trees which can provide you with fuel like Jatropha and Pongamia? And private sector can take that responsibility because farmers can continue with their farming, and these trees, perhaps the private sector, if they just start owning those trees, they will provide them with irrigation mechanisms and so on, so that it will be win-win situation for the both. So it is food and feed, food and nutrition the moment you go for horticultural species as well, so you meet all your aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vibha. And our third panelist is Swami Howard Shapiro from the Mars Incorporated. Howard.
Thank you, Tony, and I'd like to thank the organizers of the B4E for inviting me today. First off, I would like to make sure everyone understands that fixing the built environment is fairly simple. You change the motors on the machines, you change the light bulbs in the rooms, you capture steam as opposed to wasting it, you recycle water. The 4% improvement per annum that was talked about earlier is easily achievable with the current technologies. When we start to talk about really fundamental problems with rural society, none of those have as easy a solution. 61% of children under 5 in India are stunted from malnutrition and chronic hunger. 61%. That represents 34% of all the children in the world that are stunted. So that means these children will never reach the criteria of being exceptional human capital. They won't be the next Gandhis. They won't be the next Amarat Sens. They won't be the next Ravi Shankars. There will also be a drag on the economies of many of the countries like India, like West Africa, because they'll never reach their capacity to be a full-on citizen. So this notion of stunting, which is the first 1,000 days of childhood nutrition in the womb and the first 2 years, is something that India has to stand up and raise their hand and say, we will stop this. And it's not about having enough food to eat, it's about having nutritional food to eat. Without that understanding, without that subtle differentiation, we will continue to have stunting everywhere in the world. And that, to me, is a bigger problem as any problem in the rural sector. Of course, we need to eat every day. Of course, we need potable water every day. We need housing and education for our children, without question. But if we don't address this first 1,000 days in a fundamental manner, putting all of the intelligence of the agriculture sector, the nutritional sector, the medical sector, and the government sector in India to work immediately, you will have one of the biggest disasters ever in history. Secondarily, When we talk about agriculture, we need to really recognize how lazy we are as a human population. The Green Revolution is 50 years old. M.S. Swaminathan and Norman Borlaug created the short stature wheat 50 years ago, and we still talk about it. Now, those of you who have had heart surgery in this room know that you don't want to have heart surgery with a technique that's 50 years old. I myself had it last year. It went in through my arm to repair valves in my heart. 50 years ago, you would have died. 30 years ago, you would have probably died. 20 years ago, you might have died. 10 years ago, they would have ripped your chest open. So why do we think that agriculture should exist as a 50-year-old model? And why do we want to keep discussing that model without making the quantum leap forward, which is sustainable agriculture? So we need new plants. We need plants that are adaptable to climate change. We need to have the private and public sectors go after these issues simultaneously. We need uncommon collaborations. Without that, I don't think there's much hope of solving the problems. We must raise more food in the next 20 years than has been produced in the entire history of humanity. We don't have much land, we don't have much water, and we don't have really that much in the way of nutrients for fertilization because most of them are mined. Where will the solutions come from in this room? Where will the solutions come from in agriculture institutions and the private sector who are dedicated to having a supply chain that is sustainable? If we can answer any of those questions today, we'll have made great progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. And lastly to Akshaya from Syngenta Corporation.
Thanks, Tony. The occupational hazard of being the last speaker is that all your points are cleverly taken by the preceding speakers. But thanks to all my fellow panelists for really bringing out some of the nitty-gritties of sustainable agriculture and agriculture from an Indian context. What I would like to do is just touch upon maybe 3 points which I think would be critical from the perspective of how we in Syngenta see agriculture. Syngenta is the world's largest agribusiness. We have a range of technologies from chemistry, biology to biotechnology, all focused on solving agricultural challenges and agricultural problems. We all talked about sustainability from the perspective of available land, available water, and Howard alluded to new techniques, new models. I think at the base of all these new techniques and new models is not just a focus on productivity, which is crop per acre or crop per parcel of land. It's also crop per drop. So you bring in the water element as well. And those are the areas that most of the technology that's being practiced today is being focused on. The second aspect that I would like to bring about, and again, Vibha talked about the Green Revolution, talked about the impact that it had made, and Howard talked about it being 50 years old. But I think the Green Revolution, if we go back to it, was unique in the sense that it was the first time that we looked at agriculture from a solutions perspective. It was not just focusing on agri-inputs, focusing on seed, focusing on crop protection, chemistry, but it was an entire solutions approach.
Vibha, if you were the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Commerce, what would you do to drive greater institutional collaboration? You know what those folks at Terry are doing. You know what those folks at RBS are doing. How would you provide incentives and stimulate greater institutional collaboration, what Howard called uncommon collaborations, to make and stimulate this drive to have our landscapes being more sustainable?
Well, in fact, taking it also from Sunil, I'll take it this way that there are a number of successful examples. At one stage, Terry, or rather we are still involved, there was one program called Joint Forest Management, and there it was going to the communities and working with them. You cannot promise a brighter future because they don't have enough today. So you have to take care of your today's needs. So if you look at agriculture, it is more, and I'm impressed with some of the examples like Pepsi and the tomato project that is going in Punjab. So what they are doing, or there are other corporates as well, it's not that I only want to tell about that successful example. It is there are a number of cooperatives which are running today. They go to the farmer, give them the technology. The entire risk is there. They don't ask them for any money. They only ask for part of the produce. So therefore, you are taking technology to the farmer's doorsteps. The other missing link today is that of marketing. In India, we hardly process, it's about 3 to 5% of the total produce which is processed. With the result, if there is adequate or more than demand kind of production, there is slump in the market. So unless and until we plug that gap of marketing, farmer is always hesitant to invest in new technologies, and he really doesn't want much of produce. So basically what we need to do is we need to invest more in secondary agriculture. We have to take care of farmers' basic needs today, crop in the form of also small like microfinancing. Then you take care of our crop insurance. So those are the things, if you take care of them, farmer will be more than happy to invest. Today his risk-taking capacity is negligible. We have to improve that. And it is that nothing goes waste. Whatever is produced, you cannot, no country in the world can afford it, and we are still living with it, 30 to 35% of post-harvest losses. It is predicted that in last decade, we have seen increase in the energy prices, and next decade, we'll be seeing increase in the food prices. And as Howard had brought to the table, when there is so much of hunger and malnutrition spread in this part of the globe, can we afford it? Can we afford even a single penny increase in food prices? It's further going to result in malnutrition, and which is a cost to the society, which we are ignoring today.
Thank you, Viva. To Howard. So Howard, you represent the private sector. And we know that Mars has a very high regard and also very high investment in science, in research, and in the application of knowledge. And we've also heard a lot of the wonderful initiatives that Mars is supporting around the world in Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia. But why are you not doing more in India? Or why do we not know about it? And are you focusing on the producers or on the consumers?
Well, we have not been operating in India as long as some of our competitors, which certainly affects that role answer. What we've been working on up to now is where the weakest economies are the most shocked by climatic change. In this case, it's West Africa for us. We know that after 40 years of measurements, the rainfall in sub-Saharan Africa between Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Cameroon has gone from 75 inches to 48 inches, and the temperature has risen 2.5 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. That's climatic change on a grotesque scale. We also know that it takes between 7 and 15 years to breed a new tree. And the heart and soul of Mars Incorporated is cacao, the chocolate tree. But in order to generate the kind of science that's needed or make the investments, one had to give us, to the world in fact, the basic foundation tools. That was the cocoa genome, which is the map about where you need to go to make the changes necessary. So we did the cocoa genome and put it and protected it in the public domain so it could not be patented by us or our competitors. And the change has been dramatic. In India, we're collaborating with ICRISAT on the peanut genome. There are 4 pieces of the peanut genome of the sequencing. 2 are being done at the Beijing Genomic Institute, and 2 are being done by my group at the University of California at Davis with the Genomic Institute there. That will also be put in the public domain. But now if I look at peanuts, groundnuts, if you will, in India, and I look at other crops in India, I realize that in order for us to have a robust business, a simple thing like aflatoxin has to be solved. Secondarily, because we're in the pet care world, A simple thing like mycotoxins in corn must be solved. And in solving it in the way that we do for the chocolate businesses, for the peanuts, and in the corn processes that we use in pet care, we solve it for humanity. We make changes that can be exported every place. And this raises, Tony, I think, a fundamental question that we struggle with all the time, which is how much profitability is appropriate and how do you use that profitability as well as possible? I'm very fortunate to work for a truly privately held company. There are 3 members of the Mars family which own everything, including my BlackBerry and my computer, and who agree for me to come to meetings like this and speak. And their belief is that we need to spend more and more money on the issues that we're facing in the discussion today, whether it's the built environment or downstream in agriculture. Whatever it is, we have to solve these problems. We won't be in business. It's in our own self-interest. So in India, we're working on groundnuts, and I'm starting to work on mycotoxins in maize, because these are 2 things that are very important to us. And simultaneously, we have to work on other types of technological solutions to the projects and the products that we produce in order for them to be desired in this marketplace. But the first thing you have to do is recognize it's a ground-up solution. None of this can be imposed by the top. Governments taxing this or supporting that or mandating stuff really won't work. You have to listen to the people who you must work with as well as you listen to the people who make policy. And it is to companies like Syngenta and Mars Incorporated and others in this agricultural sector to agree to think about science fiction. Because who would have believed there would be an airplane that would fly through the sky in 1900 or jet planes? And who would have believed that Jules Verne's story about a man on the moon would ever come true? So when I look at agriculture, what are those science fiction things that Syngenta and Mars and others have to solve in the public-private sector of this uncommon collaboration? It's water and nutrient use efficiency, it's nitrogen fixation, it's climatic adaptability, it's nutritional, not caloric content exclusively. And while I understand productivity is a complicated story, it must be productivity. To pull people who are producing this food out of poverty, we must increase the yields, in many cases 300% in those circumstances. And that will only come through this concerted effort in India and in other places.
Great, thanks, Howard. So Howard's teed you up, actually, for the last question before we turn it over to the audience, and that is about productivity. So Syngenta has, and its predecessors, focused a lot on productivity. That's what farmers want as well. But how much of your effort could you describe as being socially oriented or environmentally oriented?
Sure. Some of the things that Syngenta has been working on in this part of the world, India, has been very, very exclusively focused on the smallholders. And we could just wish for a situation in India which is similar to what we have in the more developed parts of the world, multi-thousand hectares of farmland, which sort of which improves the productivity by bringing down costs through scale efficiencies. But when you look at the problem in India, you realize that agriculture is, attacking agriculture from the perspective of R&D, and Howard talked a lot about it, is one thing. But you must also ensure that agriculture and the work you do in agriculture insinuates itself in the social structure of where you work. And so from that perspective, it is extremely important that whatever work we do has to make sense to that smallholder. And we, with our technologies, have been able to prove that even in smallholder farms, with the right application of technology, at the right times, in the right proportions, there can be a significant increase in productivity improvement. Howard talked about yields needing to increase by 300%. It's absolutely doable. Part of it is the low base that we start off with in countries like India and the subcontinent. But clearly there is a need for the farmer to be equipped with the technology and the ways of using the technology. In my opening remarks, I talked about extension, I talked about knowledge. I think there is a lot that can be done in terms of taking the existing technologies that we have and using that in an appropriate fashion. Today, if you look at the extension that is provided to our growers, a big chunk of that knowledge comes from the private sector, because the public sector has been overstretched in terms of their ability to provide that kind of knowledge. It happened in a fantastic fashion during the Green Revolution, but since then, it has fallen into disrepair. So, given the fact that the private sector has a huge role to play in terms of improving productivity, one way of doing it is by looking at the existing tools that we have at our disposal, but ensuring that those tools are used in the best possible fashion, which means the right dosage of nutrition at the right stage of the crop, which means the right amount of water to be used, which means a lot of work not only happening on the farm, but before the farm and after the farm, and ensuring that the value stream aspects are also looked at. As a company, we are present across 90 countries across the world, and we basically deal with 90 different ecosystems and try and ensure that our products and our technology fit the ecosystem from an environmental perspective as well as the social perspective. And that, I think, is the kind of value that companies like mine and our industry can bring to the world of agriculture.
Great, thanks very much. Now we'd like to open it up to the audience, and we're going to invite, first of all, any questioners who are female. We're going to give preference to female questioners to start with. Sorry, it's really hard with the lights here, so if you could just stand up. We have one here. Okay. Could you identify yourself, please, and ask who you'd like the question addressed to?
My name is Tiffany Talsma. I work with a company called Waste Ventures. We focus on converting municipal solid waste here in India, mostly into a compost product that we generally sell to the agricultural sector. So my question is related to the nitrogen fixation and in terms of the types of tools that you see that agricultural individuals in India, particularly the smallholder farmers, what do you see at Syngenta that the farmers really need in terms of the inputs that can increase their productivity from a perspective of organic substitute to fertilizers?
Great. So we'll just gather a couple of questions to start with. Is there anyone else? Any other ladies with insightful questions for us? Okay. Akshay, can you take a shot at that?
Yeah, I'd like to sort of talk on two aspects here. One aspect of nitrogen fixation comes from the right choice of crops and crop rotation. And I think my other panelists will be able to talk a lot more on it. But the very fact that you can change the pattern with which crops are grown, even by smallholders, and sort of look at things from the perspective of a crop rotation, which helps improve the quality of the soil, is something that can add a lot of value. And these are simple things that can be done at a smallholder level as well. The second aspect is farmyard manure, and here we get into the mode of mixed agriculture, which is agriculture along with livestock. I think wherever we have been able to talk about concepts of agriculture for smallholders along with livestock and the use of farmyard manure for the perspective of increasing the nutritive quality of the soil, there have been very, very quick results that have been obtained. And a part of doing this is by again, going back to the farms, talking to the farmers in their plots, in their farms, and giving them a sense of the value that some of these quick techniques can play in terms of helping them increase the nutritive quality of their soils.
Thanks very much. So now we can open
Tony,
it up.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
I dealt a lot with organic agriculture, and I've been an organic farmer for 25 years raising seed and helped write the U.S. standard for organics. I think there's 2 points to be made. Having the ability to make compost and making compost are two different things. And most people, including some very sophisticated people, burn most of the carbon off by composting at too high a temperature. The problem with that is that you atmospherically release it, and it becomes more of a pollution than the problems that you might have otherwise. Secondarily, evergreen agriculture or tree cropping or agroforestry, however you want to call it, can help solve a number of these problems too. There are trees that fix nitrogen, and one can almost eradicate applied nitrogen to the soil with the right density of these trees on smallholder plots. There's fruit trees, there's fodder trees for animals, there's timber trees to buy houses, there's medicinal trees, there's high-value trees to sell into the European markets for furniture, and there's food and oil trees. It's important in any system that is really going to be functional not to forget the tree crops, because when everything else fails, trees tend to give you something. In drought conditions, trees give you something. And we also have to recognize that in the system of agriculture that's only 10,000 years old or something like that, earliest mankind in India, whatever the date was, has had ups and downs. And the ability to understand how climate is changing and to have seeds that adapt to climate change is really going to be critical. Whether it comes from Syngenta or from the organic seed industry or for other sources, this is going to be a big driver on success for any farmer everywhere in the world.
I can also add to this discussion. Well, although we are concentrating more on nitrogen fertilizer, there is another component, phosphorus. And mycorrhizae, that is not crop specific, it's more site specific. And technologies, of course, earlier it was more that you can only produce, it was obligatory to use root cultures for it. But now technologies are available. In fact, one of the technologies was developed by Terry, whereby now it's possible to have exenic cultures. And the beauty of this is that all crop plants that respond to it, and once inoculated, it's in the soil. So it's very important for trees, it's very important for crop plants, and it is site-specific. So unlike nitrogen, where it is a particular strain, more effective with a particular variety, here that kind of thing is not there either. And I'll also, as I said in my presentation as well, that it is not organic or inorganic. It is something like whatever you can replace, it's going to be more sustainable if you use mycorrhizae or rhizobium or azolla, whatever these small microbes are.
Great, and a great plug for diversity. Okay, we're going to open it up now to anyone in the room who's under the age of 40, or perhaps thinks that they're under the age of 40. Anyone? Okay, and now lastly, anyone else?
Good afternoon. I'm Vipul Gupta from Schneider Electric. Basically, my question is to Vibha ma'am. As Tony sir asked you, if you were finance minister or the commerce minister, ma'am, what I wanted to know is, every time you talk about a technology, we talk about cooperatives, financial institutions like microfinancing and banks. But there is a large population which do not have access even to banks. What about them? There are tribals living all over India who are not yet registered into the banking system. How can we reach up to them for any case, be it agriculture or other needs? What sort of financing role should there be? What sort of model should there be when the system is not government oriented?
Okay, just to answer your question, first of all, very soon once we have those Aadhaar cards available, that is practically bringing everyone as citizen of India and having access to whatever banking systems or others are there. My other thing was that the local level initiatives are going to be extremely important. And fortunately, there are a number of NGOs who are working at village level. And it is not, they are not looking at any funding coming from the government. It is something like the model which Bangladesh had developed on Grameen banking. So it's the farmers themselves, it's the societies which are established in rural part of the country, which are taking care of, they are depositing money, and that money takes care of the future development. Now, to answer your question, it's also that the public sector, the private sector is becoming very proactive today. So they want to take their seeds to the farmers. They want it is maybe you can say that it's a hidden benefit to the private sector, and that is why they are going, because they want assured supply of raw material, and therefore they are touching particular pockets. There is also big initiatives, like I'm aware of one that is of CABI, that is on plant-wise, where they are assisting farmers in testing their soils, helping them what should be put in the soil, as well as identifying what kind of diseases their crop suffers from. So it's not that nothing is being done, it is, I should say, it is the success stories which are to be replicated in much faster ways. So there are pockets of excellence available, success stories available in different parts, whether it is terms of generating funds for their own benefit, or in terms of taking new technologies and so on. So that is what needs to be replicated.
Thank you very much, Viva. So in the interest of time, we ask the questions. There's a session at 3 o'clock where we can ask many of the same people your burning questions. It leaves me in the few moments remaining to touch on 3 issues. The first one is, I would ask all of you to show your appreciation to this wonderful panel, please. We have Sunil, Viba, Howard, and Akshaya. Please, can you share your appreciation for their insights? And we hope to write these up for you. The second one is an advertisement, and that is at 3 o'clock this afternoon, there is a parallel session. Well, actually, it's an unparalleled session on many of the issues that Howard and others have been touching on about the role of integration in landscapes, and particularly from the tree perspective. And here we have Dr. Mohan Kumar from the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, who'll be able to answer your question, Akshaya, about whether the public sector has failed in its duties. We have Ashok Kostler, who spoke this morning from the Club of Rome. We have Peter Holmgren from the Center for International Forestry, C4, and Howard Shapiro from Mars Incorporated. So please join us for that session if you're available. And lastly, is to leave you with a thought. And that is that people who practice sustainable agriculture live longer. People who practice sustainable agriculture have more friends. And people who practice sustainable agriculture enjoy a better love life. And if you don't believe us, then try it and see. Thank you for listening.